For years, we have used the numbers to prove you shouldn't be drafting quarterbacks early in fantasy football. But maybe things have changed in 2025. Has a tier completely separated themselves, meaning that you need to start drafting them much earlier? Let's take a look at the riskiest quarterbacks from fantasy football. What is going on, Headliner Nation? Today's video all about quarterbacks and finding who was the riskiest quarterback last season and whether or not they can turn it around heading into 2025. Now, what is risk score? I've already done wide receivers and running backs. So if you've seen those videos, you already know what I'm talking about. Today's video is going to be a little bit different though. I'm only taking a look at the top 24 quarterbacks, not the top 36, in terms of their current average draft position. Now, what happens? We're gonna go through and we're gonna look at how many times did they finish as a top 6 quarterback, how many times is a top 12 quarterback, and how many times outside the top 12 quarterbacks, because realistically, in fantasy football, we want as many QB1 finishes as possible. But we assign a point to each finish. If you finish as a top 6 quarterback, you get 1 point. If you finish top 12, you get 2 points. And if you finish outside the top 12, you get 4 points. We take all the points, add them up, average them out based on the amount of games the quarterback played last season. That gives us our risk score. And do me a favor, Headliner Nation, I now have back-to-back videos where I haven't been able to give away a draft guide because we're not hitting our like goals. We're not even coming close. The very first thing I need you to do when you come into our videos, hit the like button. If you're new here to the channel, watch the video, see what we have to offer. If you like it, then give us a like at the end and make sure you subscribe. Let's jump into it. How many top 6 finishes did the top quarterbacks have last year? Lamar Jackson led the way with 9, a true MVP candidate, not only in real life, but also in fantasy football every single season at the quarterback position right now. And they've given him another weapon at the wide receiver position this season. Does it do a whole lot to help? Maybe. It's going to be another good season for Lamar regardless though. Tied at 7 apiece, Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Joe Burrow. How about the Bake Show? Baker Mayfield. Right up here with the top quarterbacks. He absolutely deserves to be drafted as high as he is right now. And at the end of the video, we'll go ahead and sort everybody by their risk score, talk about that. Then we'll sort them by their ADP, and we'll discuss how their ADP correlates to where their risk score is and whether or not we should be drafting them where they're at. Now, how many times did these quarterbacks finish as a top 12 quarterback, meaning anywhere from QB7 to QB12? Still a QB1, and that's what we want in fantasy football, especially if you play in a 1 QB league. Now, if you play in a 2 quarterback league or a Superflex league, you're going to be taking a look at breaking these numbers down even further. But for the purposes of today's video, top 6, top 12, outside the top 12. Leading the way last year was Bo Nix. Bo Nix had a fantastic season, and you got to wonder, how is he going to look heading into this year with an improved run game in Denver? Is it going to give him an even higher upside? Are we going to see a little bit more of the run game, meaning they're not going to pass it as much, but he could be a little bit more efficient? Those are the biggest questions to answer about Bo Nix. Right behind him, Lamar Jackson, 9 top 6 finishes, 5 top 12 finishes. The guy only finished outside the top 12 quarterbacks 2 times last season. Josh Allen is right in here with 5. Jaden Daniels is right in here with 5 as well. When you scroll through the top 12 list and you start adding all of these together, that's when we're going to start talking about how many times did you finish outside the top 12. And again, in a 1 QB league, you want to be drafting quarterbacks that are going to give you as many top 12 finishes as possible. That's who you want as your starter. If you're in a Superflex or a 2 QB league, same thing. Your number 1 quarterback should be a guy that's going to give you as many top 12 finishes as possible. So let's go ahead and talk about outside the top 12, and then I want to talk about whether or not it's worth drafting these guys way higher than what typically we've told you to do in the past. And a tool that you can use to make sure you're drafting your quarterbacks at the optimal spots is our perfect draft strategy found in our 2025 fantasy football draft guide. Head on over to tfhdraftguide.com or use the link in the description below. Only $24.99 for a draft guide chock full of information, some of which is exclusive to the fantasy headliners and you will find nowhere else. It updates periodically throughout the offseason, so if there's any breaking news or any major announcements, you'll find out about the changes quickly afterwards. A digital draft guide that you can take anywhere to make sure you're staying ahead of your league mates, tfhdraftguide.com. Make sure you get yours now and get ahead of the game. CJ Stroud had the most finishes as a non-top 12 quarterback last season with 14. That is a lot. For a guy that was drafted as realistically in most leagues a top 5 quarterback, he very rarely gave you that type of a return. In fact, last season, he had no top 6 finishes. So if you drafted him as a top 5 quarterback, he didn't return that value even one time last year. 2 top 12 finishes, 14 finishes outside of that. CJ Stroud is one of the guys that we have to look at as the potential bounce back candidate. He looked elite in his rookie season. But last year, whether it was due to injuries to the wide receiver core, whether it had to do with the offensive line, the play calling, whatever it may be, CJ Stroud struggled last year. They tried to redo the offensive line a little bit, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. He's going to need to bounce back big this year. Matthew Stafford, Patrick Mahomes, and Bryce Young all finished with 11. Now, Bryce Young doesn't shock anyone. He was much better at the end of the year. But Patrick Mahomes with 11 is also a big deal because this is a guy that was drafted as a top 5 quarterback last season. Was it, again, injuries to the wide receiver position? Was it the fact that he had a rookie as a wide receiver 1 for a majority of the year? There can be 100 reasons why Patrick Mahomes maybe didn't return his value. He's got guys coming back healthy this year. He's probably going to be missing Rashee Rice for X amount of games, whatever the NFL decides to do with his suspension. Travis Kelce's another year older. Right now, Patrick Mahomes, to me, just doesn't have the upside as some of the other quarterbacks. And while this number may get better in 2025, I don't know how much better it will get. Caleb Williams and Justin Herbert right behind him. But let's go to the bottom of the list because realistically, we want to talk about the guys who finished inside the top 12 as much as possible. Lamar Jackson at number 2, or with only 2 finishes outside the top 6. We talked about that. 3 quarterbacks, Michael Penix, Jaden Daniels, and Josh Allen finished with 4 games outside the top 12. Now, Michael Penix really doesn't count because he only played in 4 games last season, and all 4 of those games he didn't quite make it to QB1 status. Now, depending on how your league scores, maybe in your league he did, but when you go by just conventional fantasy football scoring, he didn't finish top 12 last year. Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels, trying to combine them, they only finished with 4 games outside the top 12. Jaden Daniels showing last season he was absolutely elite. And I made an argument for him in my wide receiver video because Terry McLaurin just feels like he's being overlooked. And because he's being overlooked, part of the question is it because you think Jaden Daniels is regressing? And how hard is he regressing? Because if you don't really think he's regressing, then why is Terry McLaurin not being drafted higher than what he is? He could be one of the best values in all of fantasy football. But this is a quarterback video. And then with 5 finishes outside the top 12, Baker Mayfield and Joe Burrow. But let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's start talking about overall risk score and who scored the best last season. At the very top with the lowest risk score, it's Lamar Jackson. And not only did he have the lowest score, but he was basically in a tier by himself, if I'm being honest. 1.68. The next closest 2 to him, Josh Allen and Jaden Daniels at 2.06. That is an insane gap. And that's why the question kind of arose, are you investing a little bit earlier than what you would think? Now, we're going to take a look at ADP here in just a minute and what it looks like compared to some other quarterbacks. Now, the ADP is best ball ADP. And traditionally in best ball leagues, you do not value quarterbacks the way you would in redraft. So really I'm using ADP to kind of put the quarterbacks in order to see what they look like. But the ADP will discuss whether or not it will match up with redraft leagues or not here in a couple of minutes. Like I mentioned, Allen and Daniels at 2.06. For Jaden Daniels to be a rookie and score this high, absolutely fantastic. I think he's going to be really good again in 2025. 2.18, Joe Burrow and Baker Mayfield tie as well. They were exactly the same in all their stats last year. 7 top 6, 4 top 12, 5 outside the top 12. Baker Mayfield was as good as Joe Burrow last season, and he's got added weapons now. So for as high as he's being drafted among the tier 1 quarterbacks, it makes sense. And then a guy that is never talked about as a tier 1 quarterback, Brock Purdy. When we take a look at the ADP, there's going to be several guys going over Brock Purdy, and we're going to discuss whether or not that makes sense. Brock Purdy finishes out tier 1 at 2.46. And if you're still watching right now, I'll apologize. I have a cough drop in. I'm dealing with an upper respiratory infection, and I am doing everything I can to make it through these videos without coughing like crazy. So I am absolutely amped up on cough syrup, antibiotics, cough medicine, caffeine, drops, whatever it is. I'm doing everything I can to make it through these videos for you. So let's dive into tier 2 at this point. Jalen Hurts starts tier 2 here. And Jalen Hurts is being drafted as a tier 1 quarterback. If you think Saquon Barkley regresses a little bit this season, then you probably think Jalen Hurts finishes a little higher than he did last year. But when you take a look at the tier 1 quarterbacks, Brock Purdy had the most amount of finishes outside the top 12 with 6. The guys being drafted as tier 1 quarterbacks, Jackson, Allen, Daniels, Burrow, and Mayfield, finishes outside the top 12, and I might have said top 36 again a second ago, 2, 4, 4, 5, and 5. Jalen Hurts had 7 outside the top 36. So if Saquon Barkley is very good once again, do we think we're going to find some of these inconsistencies with Jalen Hurts? He finished top 6 times, which is great, and it's kind of on par with some of those top quarterbacks. But he finished outside the top 12 7 times, and that's where the guys ahead of him start to separate themselves. And we will take a look in a minute in terms of ADP. Jared Goff continues to be one of the best values in all of fantasy football. Does he have as high as ceiling as the tier 1 players? Absolutely not. Is he a tier 1 guy? No, I don't believe he is. But he gives you such a good floor every single week with a chance of really solid upside that he should be considered your QB1 at a discount after all the other top quarterbacks come off the board. Bo Nix, very good in his rookie season. 8 finishes inside the top 12 combined. 8 finishes outside the top 12. They've added a really good run game now, however. Does that affect Bo Nix and his upside? Kyler Murray, for a guy that's drafted as high as he is, because people look at him and say, oh, well, he runs the football so much, it gives him upside every single week. 9 games outside the top 12 last season. And realistically, what has Arizona done to give Kyler Murray a chance to reach his upside even more? Kyler Murray, to me, is probably one of the most overdrafted quarterbacks in all of fantasy football. Caleb Williams at 3.06. Him and Justin Herbert tied for 10 games outside the top 12, with Tua being right below them at a 3.09. He only played 11 games last season. The 11 games that he played, 4 times inside the top 12. That number has to get better for him, regardless if he's injured, whatever it may be. If he's on the field, he's got to be inside the top 12 way more often. I think Justin Herbert and Caleb Williams both take a step forward this year. Justin Herbert's numbers, really that 10 that you see there, comes from the beginning of the season when they were running the ball a lot and they weren't really utilizing the passing game as much. And then when things got better as the season went on, they started to throw the ball more and more. Now, tier 3. And Patrick Mahomes in tier 3 is a travesty to where he was drafted last season. And when you take a look at the numbers, for tier 3 and tier 4 quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes is the only one being drafted inside the top 100. In fact, him and Justin Fields Patrick Mahomes is inside the top 100. Justin Fields is just barely out of it. The next closest comes in at 110. Patrick Mahomes, you have to wonder if he's being overvalued too. If we're drafting Patrick Mahomes based on the numbers he used to put up, and if we think he can realistically get back to those numbers. He's been a good quarterback, but he hasn't been a great fantasy quarterback in well over a year at this point. And maybe it's time to stop overdrafting him and start looking at some other guys ahead of him instead that maybe have the ceiling that Mahomes used to have. Jordan Love, I think he gets back into another tier next season. They've added Matthew Golden. I cannot overstate how good I think it will be for that offense. Justin Fields, a majority of the 7 games listed under other are games where he came in and out for Russell Wilson, where he only maybe ran a few plays here or there. When you take a look at the games that he actually played in, he was a guy that could give you top 12 numbers. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do with him in New York this year. Matthew Stafford, 11 games outside the top 12. Also would love to see that number get a lot better, especially given the fact that they have a very solid run game. Offensive line should be pretty good. You've got Puka and you've got Devontae Adams. All right, the bottom tier is full of a ton of potential. So if we think all these guys are going to bump up, who's going to end up replacing them? And again, it could end up being some guys that finish inside the top 24 that didn't finish inside the top 24 last year. And maybe some of these guys bump out. Trevor Lawrence, new head coach, new weapon on offense with Travis Hunter. You got to hope that he gets better. Dak Prescott, if he can be fully healthy, they added George Pickens. You have to hope that he gets better. Drake May added Stephon Diggs, year 2. Hopefully a little bit of a more consistent run game this year. You got to think he gets better. Bryce Young was a top 10 quarterback over the last 3 weeks of the season last year. They added Tet McMillan. You got to think that he gets better. Michael Penix Jr., a full season with the weapons that they have there. You got to think that he gets better. The one guy in this area that you have to question the most is got to be CJ Stroud. Because when you look at CJ Stroud, he's got Nico Collins. That's great. They added Jaden Higgins in the draft. They added Jalen Noel in the draft. They brought in Christian Kirk. They brought in Nick Chubb to run with Joe Mixon. But is the offensive line all that better? Are the names that they added this season to help improve the offense better than the names added for the other players around him? CJ Stroud, to me, he's one of the biggest question marks in all of football this year. And I'm wondering if it's best to just pass on him, let him bounce back, but do it on somebody else's team, and just go with somebody that offers a little bit better of a situation. All right, let's take a look at ADP. And there's only been 23 quarterbacks that we've talked about this entire time, and I told you 24, and that's because of J.J. McCarthy. He didn't play last year, so we don't have any numbers on him. He comes in at 121.9. He's being drafted over Justin Herbert, Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence, CJ Stroud, Michael Penix, Tua, Bryce, Matthew Stafford, all those guys. Now, one thing I mentioned that I want to re-mention now, this is best ball ADP. And because it is best ball ADP, you are going to find some quarterbacks who offer potential upside a lot higher than what they should be. Also, with best ball ADP, quarterbacks are generally not overvalued the same way they're valued in redraft leagues. So when you got guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Jaden Daniels coming in with ADPs in the 30s, realistically, those are going to be guys that are going to be going like second and third round. It wouldn't shock me to see 2 quarterbacks go in the second round this year with Allen and Jackson, and it wouldn't shock me to see maybe Jaden Daniels find his way in there as well, at the latest being drafted in round 3. Now, those guys are the cream of the crop. I mentioned Jalen Hurts earlier. Jalen Hurts being drafted at 44.8 over Joe Burrow and over Baker Mayfield doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Jalen Hurts is good. Jalen Hurts is going to give you solid fantasy numbers, but is he that much better than Joe Burrow? Is he that much better than Baker Mayfield? Would it be better for your fantasy team to pass on Jalen Hurts at his ADP and invest in Joe Burrow? I think the answer to that question is yes, 1,000%. Would it be better to pass on Jalen Hurts and draft Baker Mayfield instead? I think that's really close. And that's my question for the nation today. Would you rather take Jalen Hurts at his ADP, or would you rather take Baker Mayfield at his ADP? Which one of those guys do you think offers you the most consistent play heading into 2025? Now, the one player that scored the best, that's being drafted the lowest, Jared Goff. Main reason why this ADP shows he's so far down is because, again, this is best ball ADP. In redraft leagues, I could see Jared Goff definitely going above May, Prescott, Williams, Purdy, Fields, and maybe Nicks. Nicks probably goes above him, though. Nicks probably goes above him. Justin Fields being drafted as high as he is, again, a best ball league. People are trying to bank on him, having some games where maybe he scores rushing touchdowns and things of that nature. Should Brock Purdy be drafted higher? He scored 2.46. Should he be going over Fields, Nicks, Murray, maybe even Patrick Mahomes? Should he be going over those type of guys? And then guys at the very bottom, Michael Penix, you have to expect to, as long as he's the starter, I think he is going to be the starter, but I feel like Atlanta's being kind of coy with what they're going to do there, so that will be really interesting as well. But going over like CJ Stroud, would you take Tua over CJ Stroud? Would you take Matthew Stafford over CJ Stroud? But Headliner Nation, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you appreciated this video. Please hit the like button for me on the way out of here if you think the content was good and worth it. But for now, Headliner Nation, I'm going to let y'all go. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay safe and stay healthy. And I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.